Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the 145th session of the online Optom Learning Series OOLS. And for today's session, we have with us Dr. Anuradha Narayanan. Dr. Anuradha is the principal of the Elite School of Optometry Medical Research Foundation. The school is one of the oldest school and one of the, we say it's a temple of optometry when we go to Shankar Netralaya as a student or as, when we attend conference. So the school has completed 36 years. She is the programs in charge of the school screening eye health program and also Special Olympics community projects. And she's also a clinical director of the Special Olympics. She started working with Shankar Netralaya in 1998 as an optometrist in charge in the LASIK division of SI, and then a senior optometrist as well. She started her academic journey in 2001, and currently she is fully into academics. And in community outreach program, she has been involved with Shankar Netralaya and the Elite School since 2010. She holds and has been awarded 7 major grants to fund the large-scale screening of vision outcome and status in school-age children in South India, as an IUSSTF exchange scholarship to collaborate with the Indiana University in the US. And because of all these grants, it has led to numerous publications in peer-reviewed journals, a total of 14 publications as well as 3 book chapters to her credit. She's also a fellow of the British Dispensing Opticians and a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry. She's also the member and the executive member of the AAO India chapter. And, she holds the fellowship generally for the, she's an FAAO, which is the fellow of the American Academy of Optometry. She's also the founding member and the current president of the Elite School of Optometry Alumni Association Group as well. With all that experience, she has several awards and honors to her credit. She has been awarded, I think, twice as the best researcher in optometry by various organizations. She's also been awarded the Outstanding Optometrist of the Year in 2003 by Shankar Netralaya. And she's also been recorded in the Limca Book of Records for vision screening of 8,462 children in one day, which was a project by the Elite School of Optometry. And more recently in 2020, she has been awarded as the Woman Icon Social Activist Award by the Sweta University Dental and Management Studies in Chennai, India. So with all that experience, today ma'am is going to talk to us about how, an optometrist get involved in community outreach programs. What are the challenges and the benefits we face? So welcome ma'am onto our platform. Thank you so much, for giving us this time, and let me leave the screen time to you.
Thank you so much for putting. Thanks for the wonderful opportunity. And I am really glad that I could share my experience and knowledge in this forum to the wonderful audience. And I wish you the best in all your upcoming sessions too. And anytime, any help from my side or support from our institution, please, we are always there. And I'm glad that you invited me for the topic related to community outreach. It is very close to my heart. And just to add this information, in fact, nobody asked me to do community outreach at Shankar Netralaya or Elite School of Optometry. Out of my own passion, I was a visiting faculty at Elite School, and there were a lot of initiatives for school screening going on that time, and I volunteered myself into this work to see how I can help. But later I was so drawn into this that I couldn't come out of it. And my doctoral research work, my PhD, was in the area of community optometry, especially in the school eye health program. So that is very close to my heart actually. And of course, apart from the school eye health programs, I also take care of some special community projects at Shankar Netralaya, which are very unique. And yes, as I told you, and thanks for the kind introduction. And with that, I'll just move on to the today's session: involvement of optometrists in community outreach, challenges and benefits. No, this is a very significant question posed by many in many forums, for which I have had different answers. But as an optometry forum, I feel this would be an apt audience with whom I could discuss the challenges and benefits. And I also feel that we can discuss and learn together so many things. I'm here to share my experience and the evidence that we have accrued based on our community outreach models. And I would be more than happy to get your perceptions, and it can be a very interactive learning. And that is what I'm envisaging today. So with that, let me just move to the presentation. You can all share with me your thoughts. What do you think is the primary role of optometrists? What should they do first? You can put your answers in the chat box.
I think the major role of us is mostly, for eye examination. That's what people think. And the public perception, if you ask me, is more of, they are just like a spectacle shop. They are just going to give me glasses. That's it,
Yeah, I know. Still we have not come out of that, that fact that the public believes that we are dispensers of spectacles. They couldn't come out of it, and of course we need more of our work to change that opinion. And I also agree with you. Examination of the eyes on the whole, that is a very, very crucial aspect. Are there any other answers from anybody?
Yes. So people are saying that the role is screening for diseases like diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma.
Okay.
So that's one of the answers on the chat. And somebody says, except surgery, optometrists can do everything related to the eye.
Okay. Very, very interesting. And thank you so much for sharing your answers. I'm not going to answer this question now, and I'm happy to see your responses and hear your responses. We'll just go with the presentation, and then we can definitely discuss about the primary role of optometrists, what optometrists should be doing and what we are doing, whether we are justified in what we are doing. Okay, so let us have this question on hold, and then I will just proceed, and we'll discuss about this again. Now it's time for the question number 2. Pradhin, can I request your help for that?
Yeah, so I'm just going to launch the question about the school eye screening. Right? Yeah. So what do you think? School eye screening is simple and does not need the expertise of an optometrist. Do you think yes or no? There are a couple of other answers for your question 1 as well. I'm just trying to summarize them for you. So people are saying it's basically on primary health and eye care, providing qualitative and quantitative eye care, improving vision quality for the community, and promoting sight to the public. So all those thoughts are there.
Wow, that's such a great audience then. Okay, really impressed with your views. And I can also see the poll results here.
Yes. Majority 74% think no. It's probably not simple and does require expertise of optometrists, and about 6 of them, which is 26%, say yes.
Okay. That's again interesting to see, because thank you for this poll, and thank you for your answers too. And I'm really glad to see these answers. Of course, the 75-25 response to this side and that side. And it's very interesting to know this, because I'm going to, though it is community outreach, I'm going to show you my expert area, which is school eye health screening. So I'm going to run the story of involvement of optometrists in community outreach through the school eye screening models. based on what I have learned, based on the evidence that we have accrued. No, let me just take an example of school eye screening alone. Of course, if you have any other questions also, we can take it at the end of the session. But the story is going through the school eye screening. That's why I had this poll question also based on the school eye screening. So for those who have answered yes, it's a very simple process. Maybe you can put more information into the chat box, and then we will take it up for discussion in the later point of the presentation. Once I finish the presentation, we'll take it up for discussion. But before proceeding with this, we all believe in evidence-based practice, is it not? So everything in our clinical practices, we want it to be evidence-based. We at ESO, we have been doing this community outreach for many years. Apart from what our alma mater Shankar Nethralaya is doing, ESO is also has its contribution, especially with the school eye screening models. And the evidence that we accrued with the school eye screening is what I would be discussing. But before going into that, I have two stories to share of two children whom I personally saw in the school eye screening of the elite school of optometry model. So let me share with you the stories before going further. Then we'll have some questions and discussions, or I would share my opinion. The first story is that of a ninth grader. This was just before COVID. We were like busily completing the screening of almost 300,000 children in Chennai, Kanchipuram districts through a national school eye screening project. As part of that project, I was in a school in the suburbs of Chennai, and the screening was done, and we went to the spectacle distribution and counseling of the children. Usually in our model, we don't send the spectacles to the schools. We go in person to the school, and we have a team of optometrists and interns who would go we'll request the schools to bring the parents, and then we'll counsel the parents about the use of spectacles as to why it is needed, just like we do in the hospital. But our model is a very comprehensive model. We also invite parents of children whom we referred for other ocular conditions, and we also invite parents of children who are diagnosed with color vision deficiency. So if you know very well, in our country, in India, the school eye screening model not all screens for color vision deficiency, because according to the tenets of the 10 commandments of screening is done only for a condition which does have treatment, and it should be a public health problem. So often color vision deficiency is not screened for because there is no treatment available as such for color vision deficiency. And whenever I had, before including color vision in our protocol, I had to face our ethics review committee, I had to face our research board, and they questioned me many times on this as to why we should be including color vision screening into the comprehensive protocol of our school screening model. I didn't have an answer then, because this doesn't have a treatment. That is their justification. But we often used to see people in the clinic who enrolls into a job. As you people are all optometrists, you know very well there are other cues that are available for a color vision deficiency patient to function normally in their life, in their day-to-day activities. There are also rehabilitative measures taken, community-based rehabilitative measures, and there are many such other cues that help them perform their day-to-day activities. So this aspect of including screening for color vision was never into the school screening protocol, but we did because we insisted saying choosing a career is very, very important for school-going children. And as we see in our country, in India especially, if we see, medical examination before joining a job or a career is the last stage of the process. The student would have studied in school, in college, They would have cleared their exam somehow, and then with the help of so many other things, they would have cleared, they would have applied for their dream job. And then finally, it comes to the medical examination to say that no, you cannot enter into this profession. So this is what we wanted to avoid. So many years of education, so many years they spend, so many resources they spend on their education. And then finally, of course, it's not a big difficulty. They can switch over to another profession. But after doing all this and getting switched to another profession, instead of that, it's a very simple process of one-time screening for color vision deficiency, and then giving a counseling as to, okay, these are the choices for your profession. Please avoid these professions where color vision is mandatory, because some professions it could be life threatening. So this is a very simple aspect, but to convince a jury of the ethics committee and then include it in our protocol was a big task, which brought out a twist to our comprehensive model. We included the color vision screening. The second step was the children in the school, they are very young, naive, and they are very sensitive to such things. So we cannot counsel the children directly. So that is what we conveyed to our ethics committee. We said, we are not going to counsel the children, but rather we would be counseling their parents and their class teachers so that they can help this boy select the right career when he finishes his grade 10 and chooses a group in their grade 11. Also, we didn't want the entire school to know about a child's problem. So rather than giving this child alone, okay, these are the options, career options where color vision is not allowed, what we did was we made materials, IEC materials, and then put it as posters in the school notice board for every child to see, saying, okay, there are certain occupations where proper color vision is important. So these conceptualization and then presenting to a committee and getting an approval and then implementing it in the right way, and the logistics of doing all this is what I would like you to remember. So when I visited, let me come back to the story. So when I visited the school, we were in one such session of giving a counseling and spectacle distribution in person. So the 9th grader who was diagnosed with color vision deficiency, we had invited his parents too for the counseling. Surprisingly, both the parents, mother and father, turned up for the counseling, because it's very hard to get, see the parents in a school eye screening program, and then it is often difficult for even a single parent to come and report for counseling. But we were very surprised to see both the parents. The moment they came in and we started counseling them about the color vision deficiency in their boy, the first thing that they said was, our child wants to get into bike racing. Okay. And he is so adamant that he wants to only do bike racing. And his brother is also into bike racing, and that's why he wants to be a part of bike racing. So we were like, really wondering, we just wanted to have more details, and we asked them, okay, how is his brother doing in the bike racing? They said, recently he went into a bike racing, he met with a grave accident, and he is currently hospitalized. And that's why when we were told that this boy is having color vision deficiency, we wanted to know the details and we came back. So we said, okay, let his brother also undergo a color vision screening. We do not know the reason for his brother's accident, but still we wanted them to have a screening and a diagnosis for color vision deficiency. And to this boy, we said, avoid bike racing. He cannot enter into that profession. The second thing, the second story, the boy B, it's another school screening, which was done few years back. I went to the school for a screening. This was in a very remote village in the Kanjipuram district of Tamil Nadu in South India. And I saw a boy there who was in his grade 8. And we were checking his color vision and confirming his diagnosis using an Ishihara's pseudoisochromatic plates. and his class teacher came and stood just behind us, okay, when we were screening him for his problems. So we were wondering, okay, we were testing and we asked, okay, she was the class teacher and we were fine. But this boy, apart from reading the test plate, he couldn't read any other plates. And she was like very perplexed and asking, why you can't see? You can just try and read the other numbers. She was like just telling the boy. But then later we said, ma'am, we'll explain it to you. Let him go. So we sent the boy and then we talked to the teacher and told that he is having color vision deficiency and that's why he was not able to see the number plates. Now, this teacher became very sad immediately. She said, really, we will not be able to appreciate the colors as other people. Yes, we said. Then she said, I am a social science teacher and I often give all the students work, which are this map work, which are color based, no? Like for the water, you have one color and other things, many colors for many things. And I used to scold him and beat him for not doing this work properly. And I thought he is a very poor performer in my subject. And I used to scold him often. But I didn't realize that this boy had this problem of color vision deficiency. She also said another important thing. As teachers, we all know that children could have vision problems, no difficulty for seeing a blackboard or difficulty or some other eye problems which is visible from outside. But this aspect, this color vision deficiency, we have not heard at all. So this is the first time I'm hearing and I'm feeling really bad that I'm scolding this boy for no fault of his. So these two stories, why I wanted to add these two stories was, it gives us a justification saying it is right that as an optometry team, we could convince and include it in the screening protocol of ESO school eye screening model. And we started screening every school where we go. This color vision is part of our model. And because of this, we have almost screened now. If you can see, this was a large scale screening work that I told you. When we screened for the prevalence of color vision deficiencies, we screen only the boys because the boys seem to have a very high prevalence, almost anywhere between 2 and 8%. Among girls, it's very, very less, only 0.5% because of the X-linked association. And in our program, when we screen children in the national school as part of the National School Eye Screening Project, we could find the prevalence of color vision deficiency is almost 2.76%. We checked the boys of grade 8 and above, and it was a one-time screening. The most important aspect is if you extrapolate to the country population of this age group, it's almost 17 million boys who could be having such problem. So why I am stressing on this is, what are the benefits of optometrists being in community outreach? See, this thought process, this understanding of the concepts of public health or the decision making based on the needs of the society. Now, what is the society's needs? Why are we even screening people? We are screening so that we could help them perform better in all aspects, whether it is academics or in their work. So the screening is basically done to help them perform better than they are currently doing, than what they are currently doing now. So if not for an optometrist or an optometry team, it will not be justified to the review committee or anybody else that color vision could be included, because the commandments of screening says not to include it. So not only including it, the decision of only counseling the parents and teachers, the sensitive aspects that are included, that are involved in screening a school-going child. So the decisions on such aspects, and also completing the entire process by including IEC materials and the logistics of implementation of such IEC materials, who else but an optometrist who get trained on such aspects of public health and community optometry would be able to do this better. So I am going to add such evidence for the rightful involvement of optometrists in community outreach, such as these in my subsequent slides. So having said that, you can see that the prevalence is 2.76 percentage, and extrapolated data shows 17 million boys. Okay, this is only grade 8 and above whom we included in our screening, because before they check on a career in their grade 11, we wanted to do this. So it becomes all the more important to include it in the screening process. So when we go and involve other people in the screening to explain this and then make them understand, give them a choice of their careers, all this is better done when professionals like optometrists are involved. I see this as a benefit, and this shows clear understanding of the process of community outreach possible only by professionals like optometrists. Okay, is that only the advantage or the benefit of using optometrists? What else? You can see that this is another a publication of ours, which shows the status of eye health among tribal children, school children in South India. And you know very well, these are tribal locations are often not visited by many eye care professionals because of the difficulty in the access to such locations. Now, this is a tribal location in the Salem district of Tamil Nadu, almost 500 kilometers away from our premises. But because this was not approachable by any other means, we selected the group of schools in this location, and we screened all the children. Almost less than 4,000, 3,600 odd children were screened. And when we screened them, the surprising fact was the prevalence of refractive error. If you see, you can see it is 0.3 percentage. Very surprising, is it not? Everywhere we are talking about progression of myopia, the prevalence of myopia everywhere, and by 2050 we expect the prevalence of myopia to be almost 50% across the globe, and we are seeing a raise in the number of people or children with refractive errors. But surprisingly to us, we see that the prevalence of refractive errors was way less, not even close to 1% as reported in another tribal study reported in Odisha, but this was only 0.3%. Now tell me, most of the school eye screening programs, as you know, they screen for vision impairment, and all at the most they will screen for refractive errors. And if they find out some ocular problems, maybe that's not the main agenda. Conventionally, if you see the school eye screening program involving any other personnel apart from optometrists, what would they screen for? They would screen for vision impairment, and they would screen for refractive errors. And the subsequent professional team will come and screen the children who were identified by the teachers or the other volunteers, and they will find out refractive errors. So if that had been the case with this group of children, where there is no refractive error at all, the entire procedure of the school eye screening program, you travel all the way to a remote location and you gather people, you utilize resources, you have to find money for doing this, all this done, and you reach a place and you only screen for vision problem and refractive errors. Is the objective attained? So it is not necessary that every time only refractive errors should be screened. The decision of screening for other problems, other ocular conditions is also very, very important. If you see in this case, the prevalence of ocular problems is usually very less compared to the prevalence of refractive errors among school children in all other geographic locations, unlike the tribal areas. But in this location, more than refractive errors, it was the need for a diagnosis of ocular problems that was very, very pertinent. There is 0.3%, whereas 1.2%. So the entire efforts that are needed for screening or testing in this group of children, the objective is totally different. We cannot send the same team who would screen for vision deficits alone in this area. The whole game has to be changed for such locations where there is no other access for any other eye health issues. If you see the details of the profile of the ocular conditions among the tribal schools, you could see that we diagnosed amblyopia, squint, lens related issues, ocular surface related issues, and neuro-ophthalmic related problems. There were so many diverse ocular conditions. And to diagnose these conditions, only professionals like optometrists can go and perform this process. The complete process of diagnosing these conditions, sometimes specialty treatment is needed for attending to in such conditions. So all these things could be provided at their doorsteps by professional team of an optometrist. If not for optometrists, even diagnosis of these conditions are going to become very, very difficult. So the advantage, the second example that I would like to quote is the advantage of using professionals like optometrists is to provide comprehensive care, especially in such remote tribal locations. Okay, so is that all? Doing a comprehensive screening, understanding the concept, and ensuring holistic care to be provided, is that the advantage? Is that all the advantage or benefit of utilizing optometrists in community outreach? Are there any other advantages? So I just wanted to tell you that when we started screening for color vision deficiency, we used to use the Ishihara pseudoisochromatic plates. You know how costly, the original ones, not the duplicate ones that are available in the market. It is very, very costly. And it is made of plant dyes. The colors that are used in the Ishihara PIP is made of plant dyes. That's why as academicians, we always instruct the students, don't touch the Ishihara in the center. Your fingerprints can smudge the plate. It will not perform. It will not have the same spectral properties as it is manufactured. So it takes all the more caution to use Ishihara's PIP in the school eye screening model, especially in such large scale models where we keep on screening lakhs and lakhs of children. Having one Ishihara or two Ishihara would not be enough. We need many, many Ishihara charts so that we can perform the screening. But it has its own difficulty with respect to the cost, with respect to the dye material. So it has a very, very lesser life. So when optometrists were sent to the community outreach initiatives, then they had a thought. So this thought made us think, how can we lessen the cost of the color vision screening? Is there an alternative for Ishihara that we can construct, that we can make and we can validate and use it? So that led to the finding of a new color vision screener. This is called as Dalton's pseudoisochromatic plates. It's a color vision screener. The advantage of this is it is made of such a material. It's a plastic polymer, and this can be wiped off if there is a dirt. Okay, you can wipe off the dirt and you can keep on using it. The cost of this is almost 1/5 of the cost of the Ishihara. So it is validated by by our institution. It was constructed by one of our alumni and validated by our institution. This is currently the one that we are using. It only takes 5 seconds to finish the screening for one person. So the time is less, the life is more, and then it lasts longer because of the material that was chosen. But how this thought came is because optometrists were part of the community outreach. Optometrists saw what is required in the field so that a new product came into being for better use in the community outreach. So I would say keeping the optometrists in the outreach in the field is going to help develop many other such instruments. So not only the Dalton's color vision screener, many of you would have seen the ESO's pocket vision screener. This is a 6:9 logmar optotype. This is basically a logmar visual acuity chart, but only the 6:9 optotype was removed and then it was created as a simple screener. Because as recommended by the International Agency for Prevention of Blindness, IAPB, 6 by 9 is the cutoff line for screening school children. So based on those guidelines, this 6 by 9 optotype of the ESO's pocket vision screener helps screen the children in a large scale very quickly. You just have to show this letter and make them read the middle 5 letters. And then if they read more than 3 or 3, then they are considered pass. That means they have good enough visual acuity. Otherwise, they go for further examination. If they don't read, they go for further examination. So this has been very helpful in the large scale screening of school children especially, and you can see the illuminated version available in the right side of the presentation. So this also takes care of the crowding effect with the black bars and the surrounding 2 line of letters. Amblyopia screening is also possible because of the crowding effect that it catches. So it's a availability of optometrists in the community has made them think about the need for such quick screeners, the need for such devices. So not only the pocket vision screener, and you can see in the picture, I'm sorry about the quality of the picture, it is a bit blurred, but you can see that these are the kits that was made by the school eye screening team for the comprehensive battery of tests that we have in plan. So in our school screening model, we not only screen for vision impairment, we also include what is called as the modified clinical technique. The modified clinical technique is nothing but you have to use a plus 1.50 diopter lens while you're screening for vision problems at distance. So if the child is able to see through that 1.5 lens in his hand and then read the letters, what does that mean? With the 1.5, he is seeing clearly. So that much of hyperopia is being relaxed by this 1.5 lens. So that means the child has hyperopia, which needs to be further examined. It's a very, very quick screening method. It is called as modified clinical technique. And you can see in the kit, we have put a red color lens there. That's the 1.50 diopter lens. So we select procedures from different sources and then we decide on the battery of tests based on the needs of the community. I know the community has more prevalence of refractive error. More children are going to need quick screening for vision. So we came up with this. More children, we do not know the status of hyperopia because we cannot perform cycloplegic refraction. There are many state governments and other governments which say that cycloplegic refraction should not be done in the school premises. So we needed an alternative for screening for hyperopia. So this modified clinical technique was introduced. And similarly, the Dalton's color vision screener. We also screen the children for non-strabismic binocular vision anomalies. So all these comprehensive battery of tests was kept in mind, and this optometrist screening kit was developed by the institution. So if not for the optometrists in the outreach initiatives, these needs would not be recognized, and these kits which could help perform the large scale screening is not at all possible. So I would say that optometrists in the community outreach is going to give you more such resources, more such instruments, and this could help in large scale screening of many others also. Okay, so what did we do with all these resources that we developed, with all these gadgets that we have as a package? What did we do? We were able to screen almost in the Shankar Nethralaya school eye screening examination, school children eye examination study. We published the results of almost 1 lakh children in the public schools alone. It's not exactly 1 lakh. The actual screen children leaving the absentees would be 91,545 children. And in our subsequent publication, the one which I showed you with the color vision, there we screened almost 2.5 lakh children. So all this was possible. You know the burden of refractive error in our country. We know the numbers are increasing. So as many screenings and comprehensive testings are essential. And we are very glad that we could convert the comprehensive testing that we have done into publications reporting the prevalence of the eye health status among different regions in the country. So, with the help of these resources, with the help of optometrists in the community, only was these attainment of these targets was possible. So, are we only bothered about the numbers? Yes, numbers are very, very important. You can see, is this possible by every other team that is present everywhere? That's a very often challenge. That's a question of challenge to me always. You have a big team, you have a big school of optometry, but not everybody has that to be doing the screening in a large scale or covering more children. And often I used to tell, you can adopt a school of optometry should be adopting the district they are functioning in, and then they have to plan region wise community outreach to different parts of the district they are working in. So this is one such model. If you see, the single day large scale school vision screening is one of the unique initiatives of Elite School of Optometry. And you can see the 123 team members that I have quoted here as 20 teams screened 12,448 children in 51 locations. And it's not only a screening exercise. We tested the refractive errors, we tested for ocular conditions, everything else. It was in 2015. That time color vision was not in our protocol. Later only we included. But you could see that we performed all the screening and the testing on a single day. It was not done on many days. It was done on a single day. So reaching out to people through a school of optometry is much easier if you plan and effectively allocate your resources. So this was possible. This 123 member team included optometrists, optometry students, faculty of the institution, both optometric and non-optometric faculty, and some volunteers who drove us to different schools. So this team effort of inputting optometrists into the community outreach helped us achieve this huge target. Imagine if you want to screen 12,448 children who are located in 51 different schools, how many days would have taken if you do it in the non-conventional way? It would have easily taken 4 or 5 months if you were doing only this job. You wouldn't be doing any other job. You would be doing only this job and you would be doing it. But this was possible in a unique strategy because optometrists were there. The advantage of this model is, another challenge people often question me is, you're using the students, the optometry students, to perform the screening. Is that fine? Is that acceptable? Are they good enough? We give 2 hours training to volunteers and involve them in school eye screening. Don't we think that optometry students would perform better? And I'm not leaving them alone. The optometrist in charge of the team is going to sit with this optometry student. And in our model, every student will have an allocated role. A first-year optometry student could only check for vision. No other test can be performed by them. If he is a third-year student, he can check for, say, a modified clinical technique, or if he is an intern, he can check for non-strabismic binocular vision anomalies. So they have assigned roles. So optometrists would be performing the refraction. Optometrists would decide on the prescription. Optometrists would be diagnosing an ocular condition, but at the same time, the student learns in the field from the optometrist who is a faculty or who is a clinician optometrist. So such models, rather than using some non-professionals, utilizing optometrists and optometry students is going to increase the value of the program and also achieve the targets, the need of the community. If we wait to complete the screening for these 12,448 children, because annual screening is necessary for children, every year it is going to change. The burden is never going to reduce, but rather increase. So we need as many people as possible who are professionals. Then the right approach would be to have an optometry school adopt a district and then spread their services across the district. That would be the model that we suggest. So our numbers are very important. What about the quality of the screening? That is another challenge that people often question us. No, we never compromise on the quality. You know about the goal of the institution, the vision of the institution, never compromising quality and equal care to all. That has been the mantra of Shankar Nethralaya and Elite School of Optometry. So what we do in the school eye screening model, yes, numbers reaching out to people is important to us, but we also get the perspectives of the stakeholders to understand their problems. We meet with the teachers, children, parents, and then conduct qualitative studies like getting information from them, getting to know their own perspectives, their own beliefs, attitudes, so that we will know on what aspect we should work on in our model. So these studies, the spectacle compliance studies, gave us a lot of insight. We could meet a lot of students, children with problems, their parents. We could meet their teachers, the school headmasters or principals. All their inputs helped us in many ways to understand and modify our school eye screening protocol. And this helped us to improve the compliance to spectacle wear. Often in most of the school eye screening models, if you see, it stops with the distribution of spectacles, following them up to see whether the children are using their spectacles, whether they are compliant to their spectacle wear, or when you refer the child with an ocular condition to the hospital, did the child go to the hospital? These questions are never answered in any of the school eye screening models. Why these questions? You don't even give information to their parents. If our daughter or son is having a problem, then we don't know anything about it. What steps are we going to take? So we feel it is all the more important to convey this information to the parents. So all these things came out of our qualitative research, and then we could implement a 23-step intervention package based on the solutions that these beneficiaries told us. It was not decided by us. What they wanted was implemented as an intervention package, a 23-step intervention package, and that improved the complaints to spectacle wear from 18% to almost 56%. The complaints to referral, we could improve it from 4% to almost 78%. Even now, it is not 100%, but our efforts are improving. We are keeping on revising our strategies. The 3 key strategies that helped to improve the complaints to the spectacle wear and referral would be the frame and fit related interventions, like the choice of frame to the child or the customized fitting for spectacles. So these are frame and fit related interventions. Educating and motivating the children, like we always role model the child who is very, very compliant. We give a small award to the child in the prayer meeting so that every other child would start wearing spectacles. So such motivation and educating the parents, as I told, in-person counseling, all this was done. And for referral, we always call the parents and counsel them, invite them to the school, and then help them with the appointment. So all this involving the parents in the school eye screening process, all this helped us achieve a better compliance to spectacle wear and referral in the school eye screening program. But all this is possible only with the involvement of optometrists and the team of optometry in the community outreach. If not, the quality or the completion of the school eye screening program, the success of the school eye screening program depends on the complaints, the improved complaints. All this would not have been achieved if not for optometrists in the community outreach. So I think I've covered almost all the benefits. I just wanted to summarize it. The conceptual understanding of public health principles, the need of the community should be understood, what they want. Like I told you in the example of color vision deficiency, and customizing the protocol based on the community needs is what is a professional can add to the community outreach. That is why the adding of involvement of optometrists is very, very crucial. Of course, you all know comprehensive eye care by the professionals is going to add value at the screening site. The primary diagnosis and the early management would be done by an optometrist. Ophthalmologists should be relieved for surgical and medical management alone. Rather than using volunteers, I feel the very purpose of having optometrists is to give this proper diagnosis and management at the doorstep of the individual. And we can also be comfortable in implementing the comprehensive screening protocols, which increases the benefits of the screening. And the creation of cost-effective resources, the ones I told you, like Dalton screener or ESO's pocket vision screener, and the utilization of the resources to the maximum. How on a single day we can maximize the resource to cater to more number of people. So such conceptual things and the implementation logistics and achieving the targets both on quantity and quality, all these are benefits. Of course, you also, based on all the publications that I shared with you, you could see we have also added evidence based on which community outreach can be relied upon. Usually evidence are accrued for clinical practice, but we believe in evidence-based community outreach also. Only if optometrists are going to be there, these benefits are possible in community outreach. Yes. So at this juncture, I would like you to look at the definition or the concept of optometry as proposed by the World Council of Optometry. I'm sure all of you would have seen this definition in many places, but I would like you to pay your attention to those three words: primary healthcare practitioners. So optometrists are basically primary healthcare practitioners of the eye and visual system. So what do we mean by this primary healthcare practice? They are the first point of contact for a person in the community for their healthcare needs. So if somebody has a problem, they come to an optometrist, but are they available in the community for this? So that is why the crucial role, the primary role of optometrists is to be available for people at need at their doorstep. So that is the definition that I would like you to remember. The primary role for optometrists would be being a primary eye care practitioner. So what do I mean by primary eye care practitioner? Do I have to go and set up a clinic in the rural area and sit there? Is that all that is needed? That's good, but that is not alone enough. What else should be done? Often we confuse, no, there are many aspects of the healthcare system. It is not only the cure and the rehabilitation that we should concentrate on. There is something called as preventive and promotive eye care, which is a very, very crucial part of the primary eye care responsibilities, especially that of an optometrist. So, but often what happens is the more and more we concentrate on the treatment part and the rehabilitation part, we leave the promotive and the preventive aspects of eye health. Why? One reason could be because it doesn't pay you. If you give somebody a spectacle, if you correct somebody with a low vision care device, or you do other service, you are paid. But nobody is paid for a preventive and promotive care. You give an awareness to a group of people. You educate them on some things, or do's and don'ts on some things. No, there's no payment involved. So often this is not practiced. But you can see that in a lot of financial planning, you would see a lot of the budget allocations and all for the healthcare. You would see that the people often emphasize, rather than spending on the treatment and the rehabilitation part, if we spend more on the preventive and the promotive aspects, then the burden on the treatment and the rehabilitation part will drastically come down. But we don't want to do that, because this segment, the preventive and the promotive aspect, doesn't get paid individually. So we all concentrate till the disease happens and work on the treatment and rehabilitation. But this aspect is all the more crucial. You know, a small example is on myopia. We say people have to go out and play. No, that's preventive and promotive care. You educate people on these things. Okay, but does that get payment? I don't know. But if you have a child you are prescribing spectacles, of course you can get paid. So that is why this primary eye care, nobody has really understood the meaning behind this. Nobody has ventured into preventive and promotive care. But as primary eye care professionals, I would urge and motivate all optometrists to take this up as a crucial role. You can see we do awareness sessions as part of all our school eye screening models. This was before COVID. Of course, we have just started the school eye screening again after COVID. Awareness session is part of our protocol. And you can also see we do innovative through unique ideas. No, we make children, we make teachers, we make parents remember the importance of eye care. We celebrate a lot of important days with the schools. We give a lot of competitions to the children. So it is very important as primary eye care professionals to involve yourselves in preventive and promotive care. And these wonderful posters were all made by the students of ESO. And we believe that as from the student age itself, being part of the community outreach, not just going for the camps alone, being part of all these preventive and promotive care is also equally crucial. And all our students are being made part of this, and they love doing these things. And not only with the school children, we also have other creative ideas of creating awareness and providing primary eye care. You can see that we have installed a visual acuity chart in a park, and we have installed a visual acuity chart on a roadside in a service lane. So such initiatives triggers people to have their eyes tested. So we just say you go stand in the line, we draw a line at 3 meters, and then tell them, if you read the last line, your vision is good. Close your eye and read that line. If you read that line, it is good. Otherwise, go visit an optometrist for having a consultation. So such initiatives makes people remember the need for eye health, and we do this often with a lot of other NGOs. We create unique ideas so that people will remember eye health. So, but only optometrists and involving optometrists in such initiatives are going to help make the community outreach a better model rather than a challenge. The benefits are going to be more. Yes, for putting time for poll.
Involving optometrists in community outreach is not a cost-effective thing. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that? Yeah, we have majority of them saying they disagree, about 61%, and the rest 39% say they agree that it's not a cost-effective thing. Yeah.
Okay. Involving optometrists in community outreach is not cost-effective. So that means you agree, means that it is very, very costly. Is that so? Is my question right? Involving optometrists in community outreach is not cost-effective. So agree means those who said agree means you are saying no, don't involve optometrists in community outreach. Okay, I'm just going to remember that statement. Okay, often the most often asked question to me, the challenge about involving optometrists in community outreach. Now, the one question is there are no optometrists available in the rural regions. And as I told you enough examples previously, that we have traveled with our team to remote locations and tribal areas. Of course, we can reach out to them, but sustenance is the question that is often in mind. How often we should do this? So we are working on how often. This question needs evidence. So we are working on it. The second question that I'm often getting is utilizing optometrists in community outreach is very costly. Okay, the cost of involving optometrists is more than using volunteers or other personnel for screening. I took this question very seriously, and we did a master's work for this question. And the answer that I got, I have not yet published. I'm just going to share one small information from that data. You could see that the cost of screening one child includes screening by optometrists, and also this comprehensive protocol that I told you. Like it includes screening for vision impairment, modified clinical technique, color vision deficiency, other ocular problems, non-strabismic binoculation anomalies, everything included. This cost for screening one child is only $0.65 US if you include optometrists. So optometrists and the team that I told, So this cost is way less than the screening costs that are reported in other studies. No, in the other studies, usually the minimum number is at least $1 for screening one child. But this is the cost that we get for doing a comprehensive screening protocol. So very soon we'll be publishing this. It is under review. So I hope to share more results about this study. And one more point that I would like to add is the benefits that we accrue out of providing a comprehensive model, the benefits that are accrued far outweighs the cost that is involved in this screening model. That is what we should remember. The benefits in the sense, I detect early a problem, I treat the child with for that problem, it comes out of the problem. So the benefit that the child or the model accrues far outweighs the cost that we put into the screening. And we have gathered enough evidence. Maybe very soon in another session, we can discuss in detail about this. So no longer we could say that utilizing optometrists in community outreach is costly. Often I find people only calculate the cost of the screening. There is no money that is allocated for the benefits. Suppose I received a benefit, there is no monetary allocation for that. So we did what is called as a cost benefit ratio. And then we found out that the benefits are more when we do the school eye screening model with optometrists rather than using any other people. So thank you so much. I hope I have convinced you that involving optometrists in community outreach, there are a lot of benefits. Of course, there will be challenges in any community outreach, but I'm sure we can overcome that, because understanding of the public health and community optometry and the steps that are taken and the implementation are better done with professionals like optometrists. So I am ready to take any questions if you have. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. That was really, I would say, the passion with the way you talk and the way you convey the important message, the authoritativeness speaks it all. And I know you have been involved in all these major projects, so you can talk with that authority, right?
I didn't mean to be authoritative. I'm sorry.
No. It's more of a motivation, that kind of authoritativeness, and
Thank you so much.
Great. Just that the WCO concept of optometry is, of course, we always follow that, and it's kind of a very good thing, but getting the medical fraternity is a bit of challenge in terms of accepting that, to recognize our work. So in Asia specifically, we are talking about India, Malaysia, and Vietnam, Philippines, and all of these Asian countries. Anything which you would like to highlight? Are there anything which you think we can do, or any thoughts behind this?
That's a very good question. Thank you for that question. I do agree with you. Yes, there are a lot of stumbling blocks in this process. It's not that easy. But I would say that we have had a recent success. Optometry in India, now it is recognized under the allied and healthcare professions. So I'm sure nobody can no longer question the role that an optometrist could be playing in these initiatives. I'm very, very positive that in the long run, this understanding will become better, and people are going to appreciate, and they have to acknowledge the involvement of optometrists in the primary eye care role. This cannot be avoided. So I see a very good light in this long path, and I'm sure you will all be part of that.
That's
Definitely.
Right. That's right. Yeah, and everybody has the role to play. I think right. It's there.
Very true. Very true. Yes.
Okay. Let's just look at some questions which has just popped up. Is it somebody's asking if it is possible for us to get the screener, the posters and the screeners? Is it available for use, or is it just standardized protocol of ESO? Any thoughts you would like to share, ma'am?
Knowledge is for sharing. And definitely we can, if it is like less than 10 numbers, like I don't know from where, are you from India or I don't know, Vinodini Naidu. If it is in India, you just pay as the postal charge. We can give you the Pocket Vision screener. The hard copy one, I can send it. The illuminated ones, I don't manufacture it. We have a manufacturing agency, and you have to pay if you want to get the illuminated version, because in our community outreach, the lighting is very, very crucial. No,
Yeah.
so if you need the illuminated version, we have the copyright for the concept, but I don't manufacture it. We are not a manufacturing institution. The cost you will have to bear, and you can get the screener still. I can help get that. IEC posters, yes, you just have to acknowledge us. You can use it. We can share.
Great. Okay. So if you want to get those details, you can either write to us, or ma'am also had shared her email, on the slide.
Yeah.
Yeah. We will also share it in the chat in a while. You can either email ma'am directly, or you can write to us, and we'll try to connect you. We will connect you to ma'am, and we can see how that works. And thank you so much for opening that pathway for a lot of us. Great. The other question is, do you also prefer to do the aided visual acuity with the plus 150, which you are mentioning, to ensure if the prescription is correct? This is again during the screening. Do you want to do that? Yeah.
Aided visual acuity with plus 1.5, just to ensure that prescription is correct. It is a possible good logical thought. I would say you can do that. But how much of time are you going to allocate? See, whatever said and done, even if you put 1.5 and he doesn't read, you will not be convinced. Anyway, you have to do a lensometry for their spectacle. No, you want to recheck their vision once, because the screener will say whether he is 6'9" or no 6'9". That's all. So you would want to check their vision. Yes, logically, this is the right step. You can check whether they are overcorrected or undercorrected. But logistically, this alone would not be enough. That is my conclusion.
Okay, great. Yeah. So it won't give you a definitive answer. You will still have to do some more tests.
0.5 more or 1 more and all, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that needs testing. But yes, logically, if he reads with that, then you know the answer, definitely.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Great. And any tips on tackling students who malinger during eye screening?
That's a very interesting question. Often we find such students in many schools I have seen. But only one thing is, there could be a genuine component sometimes. Okay, but sometimes we don't understand that. So make sure you give the benefit of doubt to the child always. That is what I would say. If the child has something to say, I would try to find an answer for that problem, definitely. If based on everything else I come to a conclusion I don't have an answer, yes, I will do. But of course, I have seen lots of hundreds of children malingering. Very simply, I would put a trial frame, because they all want spectacles. One side they don't want spectacles. There is a group of children like that. One side there is a group of children who wants to wear stylish spectacles. So they would only come and say, I can't see anything. Okay, when you give a vision chart. So what I would do is, I would happily take them for refraction, put a trial frame, put block one eye, and then put plus 1.5 and put minus 1.5 in the same thing, make them read. Okay, they will happily read till 6/6. I'll say everything is good. This is for those who are malingering with vision complaints. Okay, of course, we do a direct ophthalmoscope sometimes to see if there is any other problem. Sometimes they give vague complaints like, I get stones out of my out of your the orifice that you have. No, every different types of complaints and all they would say. But first thing, I would check for the genuineness of the complaint, give the benefit of doubt to the child. If I'm convinced with my answers, then I would go test for malingering. And that's one step that I told you, putting a planar combination and then trying to find out whether it is truly a malingering child.
That's right. Yeah, that's great.
Nobody will come like a blind child in school screening and all. In community, nobody can cheat like that. They come to the hospital, they'll do that. But in the school-eye screening, no, if it is a blind child and they can't act like that, the teachers themselves they can find out. But
Yeah.
often they would malinger for no vision impairments, like small vision impairments, which you can tackle with the Plano combination in the trials.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, and another question which comes out here is, uh, according to the experience, you're working in a big community hospital setup, and all of them, you get the help from that particular setup and community. But this is related to northern part of India where there are no such hospitals, probably, which does those kind of big projects, which the attendee is asking. Is there anything which we can do to do such big setups and projects? What are your recommendations on going to a step where ESO is now, probably, if I may want to put it that way?
That's a very important and crucial question, I would say. I have seen there is so much of disparity in the eye health services that are available in different regions of the country, not only even in the so-called Tamil Nadu where medical facilities are far better. There are locations where it is not that good, that available. Okay. And your question is also very crucial. There are no such hospitals that can run school screening. See, there are two things that I would want to understand or I want to clarify. The first major thing is availability of a hospital as such, where you can refer children. That is the predominant need, because most of the conditions you would be able to tackle at the school level itself. That's one good thing about school eye screening programs. So, but there are conditions that needs referral, a surgical management or a medical management at the hospital. For that, you need a hospital. Are you saying that there are no hospitals like that, or those hospitals do not involve them in school screening? I don't have clarity on that. So I'm assuming that hospitals are there, but they are not attached to the school screening process. So one thing which we can do is go meet administration of that hospital. If you are in a school of optometry or you are an independent practitioner, I know many independent practitioners in Tamil Nadu who tie up with organizations and do school screening. They are independent practitioners, but they tie up with hospitals, and then if there are any referrals, they send the patients to them. And if there are any refractive requirements, they send their patients to this person. So there is an arrangement like that which can be done. If you belong to a school of optometry but do not have an attached hospital, find out the nearest hospital and then explain and have an understanding between you two. So you go as an optometry school, perform the screening and say you will refer children who needs treatment to this. This is easily done if the hospital could support these children free of cost. But the vitamin that is needed is money. Okay. So you should write grants for such projects that you are envisioning. The first step is to find out some grants. If you can support the hospital for the management, because no hospital will say I will do everything free of cost. That is the only difference, right? So you write grants or you tie up with some NGOs. There are Lions Club, Rotary Club in every park, or any other such NGOs. You can tie up with them, ask them to fund this project. But often the mistake that is committed by people is you only ask money for screening. Okay. That should not be the case. Okay. I don't believe you just want to do a big screening, put banner and then take photos and leave it. That's not the right way of doing things. Including awareness, you put everything in your proposal. As much as you do your screening, it is all the more important to give an awareness session. Now you have online strategies, you can try it out, but include all that in your grant proposal. Get money for everything. Of course, I would not say India doesn't have money or any other country does not have money. Everybody has enough money. The way you are going to put the request, but genuinely do everything. Okay, they should see you do that. See, let me tell you one secret. Yes, I work in a big hospital and everything is available for me. but I have not got a single penny from Shankar Nethralaya for any of the works that I told you. I raise money for everything. Okay. All these were raised by individual grants. I write to people, I explain to them, I do talk a lot, and I have to get money, convince people for each and every project. They will say, ma'am, you just come and screen the child and go away. I would simply say, no, I won't do that. That is not my model. Okay. They all want to screen, put banner, and then take a photo, leave. You shouldn't leave them. You should say, I want to come back, give spectacle. I will come and give spectacle in person. Coming in person means lot of money. One more visit to the school involves more money. But how much of impact that is going to create, you see that. You see a parent in person, counsel them, or you send a spectacle to the school. The headmaster will keep it in his cupboard, not even give it to the child. So which one do you prefer? That is where the difference lies. That is why nowadays nobody questions me on the protocol, because I know what I'm doing. But initial days, even I faced all this. Okay, people would often say, ma'am, we have an opticals, we will make the spectacle and give it to you, you just distribute. I didn't know this. I said, okay, in my early years of community outreach. But one good thing we always do is we ensure that the product that we deliver to the beneficiary is the best. I got these spectacles from that person, checked everything. 90% of the spectacles were wrongly made. You know what I did? I simply returned it to them. I told the schools that I will take another 10 days. I begged and borrowed money, made my own spectacles from the hospital, gave it to them. It was a lot of headache for me, but that was a good learning. So just because I'm in a big setup, that doesn't mean that I have a lot of money. Okay. We also ask for donations. I write a lot of grant proposals. I approach industries. I approach NGOs. I have a vision for catering to these many children. My target is at least reaching out to 100,000 children per year. So I know that in my mind, I know my comprehensive model. I know how much of money I need. I will raise that fund. And of course, as I told you, if I have to speak with someone, see the tribal location, I told you, I don't have a hospital. Shankar Nethralaya is not present at every location that I am talking about. The first thing that I would do is I'll go visit the government hospital there and I will get their permission. I know for what I can refer. If it is a cataract, a pediatric cataract, whether it will be done there is what I will first go and scrutinize. I will inquire that first. If it is not available, I'll find out a source where I can refer these children. I follow it up. And then only I ensure that I will do the screening. Otherwise, I don't take up that screening at all. So though I belong to a big hospital, even I have these problems. So it is not that only big setups can do. Big setups also have their problems. Independent practitioners or other schools which is not tied to the hospitals cannot do. I don't agree. Initiative should come with this. Money is needed. Yes, definitely needed. Write and ask money. If you are genuine, if you do it the way it is supposed to be done, people would appreciate your work and they will definitely contribute to the other works which you are planning.
That's right. That's right. I think very well said. And I like the point of the emphasis of individual optometrists as well. So, we are talking about, because when it comes to school screening and all that, the perception is that only optometry schools and eye hospitals are the one who does these screening projects, and independent optometrists, can't do. And I think you very well said that, it's an individual role rather than just the optometry school doing it, right? Yeah.
Anybody should be involved in community outreach. Definitely possible. Yes.
Definitely possible. Yeah. It does take a lot of efforts. And of course, as ma'am said,
of course, a lot of efforts are needed. It's a full-time job.
Full-time job. Yeah. And as you said, if you have your proposal and if you have your thoughts jotted down, of course, getting the funds is the next step, and planning it out is followed by that. So it's very important that you have
one chat message. No big organization coming to help economically. Okay, I just wanted to tell you one thing. Don't plan big first. Okay, start with something small. Okay, in that small work, you show your work. For small work, you need small money. Okay,
Yeah.
then people will see your work and then come to support, make it bigger. From the beginning itself, don't think I will do 1 lakh. Start with 100, a small school, or no, a small village, something like that. That would help plan bigger things.
That's right. And I'm happy that if the attendee who is the individual or independent practitioner and they are wanting to do that, at least the thought has started. Now you just need to find your way, right?
Yes, yes. Anything, if you want help for correcting your proposals and all, let me know. I'm not going to sit correct word by word, but I'll give you a clue. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, ma'am. And let's just take one last question about the school screening protocol. Can it be also applied for preschool screening, or do you have any separate protocol for them as well?
Usually, we cannot do the same protocol. Okay. Some schools you would find the child can read. These preschools and all, in these private schools or the well-tutored schools and all, the child might read the vision chart, but most of the times they won't read the preschool stages and all. So we use a different technology. We'll do a near cover test. We'll do a retinoscopy, and these two will help us decide on most of the things. Okay.
Yeah.
And nowadays you have got many screeners that are available. Okay, there is screeners based on photo refractions that are available. It is costly, but if you have access to such screeners, it just takes few seconds. You get the value about the possible refractive error. It gives you the status of the alignment of the eyes, and it will tell you whether you need to refer the child or not refer the child. You can see the age appropriate refractive errors and make a decision on that. If such screeners are not available, then we do these two tests, retinoscopy, and then we can do a near cover test, and then we will do this. But this cannot be done by this need expertise. We'll send a pediatric optometrist for this. We will not send anybody for this, but we will send a pediatric optometrist alone for this job now, because they can make this decision. Nobody else would be able to make this decision. So not the same protocol. This is the changed protocol that we follow.
That's right. Yeah. And I think you did mention also in the presentation, depends on the need. First year we'll do vision. So those who are expertise in that pediatric population, probably they would be the ones. Yeah.
That hierarchy is very crucial. We should know whom to give what job. Previously, I used to go for all my screenings, but now I know who is doing what. Okay. So that training is also very important. Now, the moment I run an optometry institution, so I know the need for training. Your team should be under constant training. Whether there is a screening happening or you're sleeping because of COVID, it is immaterial. The team should be always prepared for anything that you send them for. That is very, very important.
That's great. Thanks. All right, ma'am. Thank you so much, for that wonderful and informative talk and sharing your experience and thoughts with us, ma'am.
Thanks a lot. It's a good opportunity. Thanks so much. I really enjoyed being in this session, and look forward to any questions from the audience. I'm ready to take it. If I'm a bit slow, please forgive me. Whenever I find time, I would reply for that. Yes. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And since this is an eye screening talk and school eye screening, just for the Indian optometrists, I just remember that Optometry Council of India is having a project to celebrate World Sight Day. There is a target of numbers to hit.
In 100 days. I know.
In 100 days. Yeah. So let me take this opportunity to propagate this as well. So if you want to do some screening, please write to Optometry Council of India at info@optometrycouncilofindia.org or visit their website and register your interest, and you can be a part. And I think even if you do one patient, it counts a lot. So, and those who are interested can write to us or OCI, and we can definitely work together towards the World Sight Day. Right? And just Most welcome, ma'am. And just connecting with the World Sight Day, we also have an e-symposium planned on the World Sight Day as well. So we'll be sharing more details in a couple of days on how to register and how to attend. But it's going to be on 14th of October on the World Sight Day. Timings are there. Please mark your calendars as of now. We'll be sharing the link for this e-symposium very, very soon onto the emails. We do have a session planned next weekend. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Take care, be safe, and I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. I'll take leave now.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Bye, all of you. Thanks for your nice questions too. Thank you.
Bye.